A little background about the YWCA National Capital Area is that we are a workforce training and adult basic education organization in Washington, D.C. And we realized a few years ago that our retention issues were largely focused around things that kept students away from face-to-face classrooms. Not things that, depleted their motivation. They still wanted to learn. We just weren't offering them opportunities to learn that fit with their schedule. And so we started developing a distance learning program, which has, been very serendipitous in recent times. And during the course of developing this distance learning program, we realized we needed to have more robust screening tools to identify our learners' needs, because when they're not in front of us face-to-face every day, we need to have a better and more comprehensive background for them. So we put the microscope on our learners and developed these tools. Now, a few things about screening. I've heard some folks say that screening is about, picking the cream of the crop, and that is not necessarily the case. I know some folks may use screening for that, but we use it to figure out what our students' strengths and needs were so that we could meet them where they are. And then we use the results of these screenings to inform our program design and supports in a variety of areas, in our orientation, in our instruction, our assessment and feedback, our support services, and also our program culture. So I'm going to just dive right in to overviewing a few of these screenings. I have also written a blog post for EdTech that I believe will be published soon, and that blog post has links to samples of all of these screening tools. So if you are interested in using some of these, you can access them through the links and see them more completely. All right, so the first interview, the first piece of screening that we do is actually called a psychosocial interview. And this is a conversation between our social worker. We are fortunate enough to employ a social worker who is trained in developing rapport and having difficult conversations. And they sit down with the prospective learner and have a conversation about the learner's history. Essentially, I'm going to open a sample here so that you can kind of see the topic. The social worker has a list of topics they want to cover, and it's taking a while to load. I hope it does show up. There we go. But they're not following this, very chronologically. But instead, they're conducting a conversation in which they hope to hit these topics. And the information that we collect through this interview is very helpful in terms of what supports we can offer our students. And we know it right off the bat, so that if they have a barrier like mental health issues or a legal history, a felon or something like that, we can start right off the bat with finding them resources and developing programming to help them overcome those barriers. And so I'll just do a little scroll so you can see some of the topic areas that we have. And it also goes into some open-ended questions. How will they manage their barriers? And our social worker works very hard to speak with our prospective learners to develop a plan for how they might address any issues that would prevent their success or that would impede their success in the program. In the course of, the psychosocial interview, they also work with the social worker to complete a trip planner. And I know this is unique to DC and other areas that have public transportation, but most of our students do rely on public transportation. And so we make sure they have filled this out so they know the best way to make it to our facility, and also some alternatives. Because there's always something going on in the city. There are detours, just how do they get here? How do they get here on time so there's no excuses? And we talk to them about how to best address any transportation issues they might have. Now, of course, for distance learning, this is not as relevant, but we do still, in normal times would ask them to come in and meet with advisors or come in for a group meeting or something, and so it is still useful. We also work with our learners to fill out an economic security index. We use this one. Excuse me. It's a nice index that kind of shows how much they'll have to make in order to have a living wage in our area or in whatever area you're in based on their life circumstances. And that's helpful for career planning and figuring out, well, what job do you want? How are we going to make this work? And we also walk them through some other benefit finders, like this one from the Social Security Administration, because what we've found is a lot of our learners are eligible for benefits that they're not taking advantage of. And so we use tools like this to make sure that our students are getting all the support that they can so they can focus their attention on their education. The next one, probably a lot of you are familiar with, is the O-Net interest profiler, and we have them complete this during orientation, just to kind of see where their career interests and their experience may lead them in their career path, and so they can see what that looks like as well. Now, into kind of the more explicit surveys, we do use Google Forms, like the folks from St. Paul, for a lot of our surveys. We either link the public version on a web page. We use a learning management system called PowerSchool, where we store all of our surveys. We embed them there so the students can access them easily. But if it's a potential student who has issues with computer or doesn't have access to that, we can also assist students with filling it out over the phone. And it asks questions like, what technology they have access to, what devices they use, what service do they use on the internet, what kind of cell phone they have, what kind of access they have, and things like that, so that we know right off the bat what tools they're working with. And we use this in a couple ways, either to make referrals so that they can get access to computers, to internet service. There are a lot of excellent nonprofits and government programs out there that will help folks with that. But we also use it so that we know, what the capabilities are and what we're working with. Along those lines, we use the NorthStar digital literacy assessments in our intake process. There are a lot of digital literacy assessments under the NorthStar umbrella. And you can see here, it goes through essential computer skills, software skills, and daily life technology use. We have students do these first 3 surveys or assessments during intake, just so we know their base level of skills with these technology skills. And we've integrated a lot of the other assessments into our curriculum. But these 3 are the ones that we've realized we need to know ahead of time how the students interact with technology. And for those of you that aren't familiar, it looks a little bit like this. The Internet Basics one, the first question is just about identifying which of these are internet browsers. And, a student can go next. And then we know, okay, they know how to access the internet. And if they get it wrong, then we know we need to teach them how to do that. NorthStar does have free accounts, but we do have a paid subscription where we can kind of aggregate all of our students' information. But either way, it is definitely a useful tool. Another survey that we utilize is the Online Learning Readiness Survey. And some sample questions from this survey ask about the student's situation at home. Is it amenable to studying? It asks about their own personal habits. Are they a procrastinator? It asks about what their schedule looks like. Do they have time to study from home right now? It asks about how they interact with a computer specifically. Do they get tired if they have to read long blocks of text? If they answer often, then we know we need to have other stimuli integrated into the course. And how reliant are they on some of the characteristics of a typical face-to-face class in order to succeed, like direct interaction with a teacher, discussions with their peers? What types of interaction do they need to be successful? And of course, we ask about their self-advocacy, because when you're not seeing a student face-to-face every day, a lot of times they may have issues that don't pop up as naturally. So we want to know, do we need to be reaching out more? Or are you going to reach out to us? What level of interaction do we need? And how much training do we need to give you on how to advocate for yourself? We also do a motivation inventory. And this one has been a very interesting one. It kind of targets the learner's level of intrinsic motivation, which is really crucial for adult education, and it's even more so, of course, for distance learning where they're largely self-directed. So it identifies motivation factors that lead to success, and we've been having a fun time looking at the results of these compared to our outcomes. But it also helps us develop interventions. You know, if somebody says, no, I never think before I act, then we know, well, you may need to have some explicit instruction on reading instructions, for example. And then in terms of using the results, Google Forms can export in a few different ways, directly in kind of their native system in the survey itself, or it can export as a spreadsheet. And I was supposed to have a link here to show you. I do not, so we'll just skip that. But I do want to note that when you export in the survey, it's actually really nice because they'll aggregate all of the students' results and give you a pie chart so you can see the majority answers at a glance and the minority answers, but it'll also show you individual answers either by student or by question. So there's a lot of flexibility in there with how you export it and how you use it. And so kind of wrapping up, using the surveys to inform program design and supports, we use them in orientation to develop kind of preventative interventions where we teach students, you know, about growth mindset and about setting a schedule to avoid procrastination and things like that. We use it in instruction where, again, we explicitly refer back to all of these kind of motivational factors and success factors by design that's built into our curriculum that we reference back continually. It goes into assessment. You know, how do we assess them? Are we going to have a giant block of text they have to read, or will they work off of a video, or is it going to be a combination of these? How we give feedback and how often we give feedback, how often a student needs feedback. What support services we offer. That is a huge one, and one that we try to do as much of as we can. And then program culture. How do we build a friendly culture so folks who might be a little leery of distance learning feel part of the community even though we're separate? And I'm happy to answer questions about any of these. We've been working for a long time on building aspects of our distance education program. And I'll just say the screening tools have been very instrumental in helping us build that. And of course, program evaluation, it's not a screening tool, but we use a lot of these screening tools to kind of check back on how we've improved students' responses on those. And we also do a lot of surveys. And that's that.